President Bola Tinubu addressed Nigerians on Sunday in his first independence anniversary speech as President of the Federal Republic. President Tinubu spoke on different issues ranging from Nigeria's diversity, unity, justice, economic policies, and security. While he acknowledged that some of his government's reforms were difficult and painful for Nigerians, the president affirmed they were inevitable, given that they hold the key to transforming the economy and advancing prosperity among the populace.
Dear compatriots, it is my unique honor to address you on this day. This is the 3rd anniversary of our nation's independence, both as the president of our dear country and simply as a fellow Nigerian. On this solemn yet hopeful day, let us commend our founding fathers and mothers. Without them, there would have been no modern Nigeria. From the fading embers of colonialism, their activism, dedication, and leadership gave life to the belief in Nigeria as a sovereign and independent nation. Let us, at this very moment, affirm that as Nigerians, we are all endowed with the sacred right and individual gifts that God has bestowed on us as a nation and as human beings. No one is greater or lesser than the other. The triumph that Nigeria has achieved shall define us.
President Bola Tinubu has approved a provisional wage award of 35,000 naira for all treasury-paid federal workers for a period of 6 months. It follows talks between representatives of the federal government and leaders of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, aimed at averting their planned indefinite nationwide strike. State House correspondent Adesuwa Omorwan has the details.
In a last-minute effort to prevent an impending nationwide strike, scheduled by organized labor to protest the removal of the petrol subsidy and economic hardship starting on October 3, 2023, the federal government initiates this crucial meeting with leadership of the unions. After hours of discussions, consultations, and negotiations, the meeting concluded without a definitive resolution on the impending strike.
I am happy to say that after 4 hours, we have reached certain agreements that inure to the benefit of the Nigerian worker. Agreements on wage bill, agreements on committees, on salary increment, agreement on the CN bosses, agreement on several other things, I believe, both TUC, Labour, and government side. We will, hopefully, we expect that Labour will call a meeting of their various branches and executive tomorrow to present the agreements that have been reached. And we pray and we believe and we hope that the strike will be called off on Tuesday.
We have looked at almost all the issues, all the promissory notes, from the government. And we looked at how to translate them to reality, and to be workable. And then we're going to take those promises to our organs. Of course, these people here cannot just wake up and review and call off action. So, like he said, we're hopeful that our organs will have a look at them and give us a fresh mandate on what next to do.
Let me, on behalf of the TUC, also point out to the fact that we've had a series of conversations surrounding the issue raised, and we do hope that by tomorrow we are going to get across to our organs so that we can also look at it and cross-fertilize ideas and see the way forward. I'm sure we are coming back again.
However, the Chief of Staff to the President, who chaired the meeting, announced several agreements, including an approved provisional wage increase of 35,000 naira for all categories of federal workers. This adjustment is an upward review from the president's earlier announcement in the day in his Independence Day broadcast, where he mentioned a 25,000 naira increment for low-grade workers over 6 months.
Twitter, there was a lot of chatter on Twitter about the issue of low-income workers only falling into the category of the wage bill, and they supported that, and that has we did communicate with Mr. President, and he quickly did say and agree that that all categories of workers will be given the wage bill. There's nothing like low income, mid income, or high income.
In a statement issued at the end of the meeting, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, disclosed additional government commitment. This including expediting the provision of compressed natural gas buses to address transportation challenges resulting from the removal of the petrol subsidy, waiving value-added tax on diesel for 6 months, and initiating 75,000 naira payments to 15 million households for 3 months, commencing in October. Furthermore, the meeting highlights the government's plea for unions to avoid a strike, just as labor unions push for higher wage awards. Other resolutions include the formation of a subcommittee to plan the implementation of interventions, addressing fuel subsidy removal impacts, and addressing the issue of Road Transport Employees Association of Nigeria and National Union of Road Transport Workers in Lagos State. The awaited decision of the labor unions as they return to the negotiating table on Monday, mere hours before their threatened strike, will be closely watched. Adesuwa Omoran, Arise News.
Joining us now on the morning show to review the Independence Day speech of President Tinubu is Professor Anthony Kila, a professor of strategy and development at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies. Good morning, Professor Kila. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Well, Professor Kila, I recall that you and I and Professor Quinteroa discussed this same subject yesterday on This Day Live, on this same station. The only difference since then is that organized labor met with federal government officials for 4 hours. And then a statement was issued, and the expectation of the chief of staff is that maybe today labor will call off the strike. I guess that's what is new, but you may have changed your mind about some of the things you said yesterday. Over to you.
Oh, no, I have not changed my mind. I continue to believe that overall, the speech delivered by the president was a well-written speech. You know, the first paragraph, he started by acknowledging the essence of the 1st of October, which is a historical day. Maybe Nigerians, as the people, perhaps because of the sort of disappointment when we compare the past to the present and to the hoped future, because of the disappointment we get, maybe we need to start calling it celebration, and just call it anniversary, so that we won't be forced to look for something to celebrate. Rather, it just becomes a day of reflection and stock-taking of where we are as a project. So there are 2 aspects to the speech. One is the sort of ontological and temporal-centered speech about what the 1st of October means and what is the holiday which some of us are enjoying, which you, Dr. Abacha, and the rest of your crew are not enjoying because you are working. But then again, you are in the media. Just to reflect on that day. The second is government issues of the day, and that is where there's been a change. From 25,000, there's been an increase of 10,000. You can see the intention. So 2 things have happened there. Number one, I think the first big headline is that labor is united, because let's not forget that a few weeks ago, some weeks ago, not a few weeks, you didn't have a united front in labor, and that is because it's a difficult case that's trying to make. So somehow, labor union is all united with TUC, NLC, and the rest of them together. And the president also has moved from 25,000 to 35,000. There are 2 ways to look at that. You can argue this is a listening president, that a presidency that started from 25, then head the people, and moved to 35. Otherwise, you can look at it as haphazard. because you could have thought all this thing through and consulted before doing. But, you know, those are details that some of us are fixated about. I can see the good intention in trying to avert the strike and putting more money on the table. That's one way to look at it. But I think because of the young people watching us, it is good to also offer another kind of alternative, which is rather than doling out money, it might be good to go to a more consultative kind of governance that focuses on supply rather than demand. You see, the problem we have in the country is not that we do not have money to buy things. The problem is that we do not have things we have ourselves, and then the money is not enough. This money that they're increasing to people, which is not enough, by the way, money tends never to be enough, but that is not enough. My fear, as a student of economics with interest in microeconomics, my fear is that it's going to lead to inflation because we have not augmented the supply side of the economy and we're putting more money into the hands of people. That is a problem, but we shall see. My other concern is that this thing called temporary measures, I don't know what's going to happen in 6 months' time, but I advise those who are advising the government to start thinking forward in these terms.
All right, thank you very much. Now, a few things around the president's speech yesterday. Whilst, like you mentioned, it looks like a well-written speech. However, some people have said, and as we opined earlier on today, that it doesn't seem there are too many. There are a number of vague areas. So some of them around timelines, for instance, how. Yeah. It just sounds like promises and a hopeful note, but what perhaps people were expecting to hear from the president was where things that were more concrete. So he talked about CNG kits, and he said soon. Not measurable, no timeline to hold him to account. He talked about even the wage for low-income earners. I mean, thankfully, that had been reviewed following the meeting with the federal government and organized labor. But they also talked about low-income earners, again, a bit vague around that. Talked about 75,000 naira paid to 15 million households over 3 months. How? The implement. At this point, do you think that perhaps we should be looking out at more detailed in terms of the how? How would we expect to do this? How do you hope to do that? Because we've had a lot of promises in the past few weeks and months of this administration, and it's time for us to get working and tell us, okay, how is this going to happen?
Well, let me give you my personal, not very humble opinion, because I think my opinion is a rather informed opinion on this matter. Let me give my opinion is that the speech of the 1st of October should not be about government. It should not be detailed. I think the presidency, when next they want to write these speeches, should just talk about the big narrative of the Nigerian history, the Nigerian ethic, the Nigerian ethos, and the view of Nigeria. Then if you want, the ministers or the president in another speech should talk about policy. A policy speech is not the day of 1st of October. What you're asking for is a policy speech, which can either be delivered by a minister or the president himself to say, this is what we're planning, and this is where we're going to locate this plan. This is how long it's going to take to execute. This is how much it's going to cost. And these are the people that are going to benefit from it. And maybe these are the people that are going to lose from that. Now, I have done my straw poll. These 3 million people who have received money from government, I've not known anyone. I want viewers to look around themselves to see if they know somebody physically out of the 3 million. I know, 3 million. And this is a lesson. I'm not saying the president is lying. I'm not saying the president is not accurate. But I want people to notice that the fact that when you look around you, you don't know anybody that has received it, tells you anything we do in Nigeria for 3 million people is very little. 3 million to consider to 200 million is not a lot at all. And that should reframe and make us rethink the way we do policy. This idea that the government wants to distribute money to Nigerians is not something that can work in a population of over 75 million adults.
Okay, so, you talked about grand ethos. Do we have any? What's the grand ethos for Nigeria in a country that probably, when you look at it empirically, it's become a country where only those that are brazen enough to have criminal mindset to do things and get away with it are the ones that reign. So what's the grand ethos in that country where there is no sincerity from politicians? So what's the grand ethos in that country? You also talked about not having specific speeches on Independence Day. It should just be about, you know, the poetry of nationhood. But even the specific part he announced was also changed. He announced 25,000 naira for low-aid workers. A couple of hours after, during the meeting, they changed it to 35,000 naira for all the workers. So this is a government that makes policies on the road as they go. They can say something by 12 noon, by 6 o'clock, it's all changed. And that's why we had a case with the Dubai case, when they say, oh, with immediate effect, or the ban is reversed. Turns out that nothing like that happened with all their press statements. So, please, bail me out. The quality of policy-making process.
Yeah, exactly. Let us use this. I'm going to read from right to left and start from where you stopped, then go to where you started from. So, students of leadership at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies, where I teach, know there is a unit called Strategies for Effective and Efficient Decision Making. One of the best ways to make decisions in a modern era is to go through consultation, consideration, and communication. You see, ideally, before they announce that 25,000, they will have agreed it with Labour, so that when they announce it, they don't need to go back. Announcement is not a promise. A promise is what you say, and is what you commit to do. Announcement is making it public. So we need to learn to differentiate those things for effective and efficient policy making. So this is a case study on how not to do it. You know, you learn well, then you do it better. You talk about ethos. Yes, we have a problem of ethos in Nigeria. That is a fact that our sociologists and historians need to help us with. But the good thing is that ethos are not mountains. They're narratives that people create. 2 ethos have been attempted in the country. The first one was one of the founding fathers, where they created a Nigeria of growth and prosperity. The regions were striving hard to do great things, and you know, people were proud of being Nigeria, which was being positioned to be the leading country of the black race. I do not like the word race, but here we go. To be the leading nation of black people across the world. That was one kind of ethos. Then from 1966, some people tried to make a Nigerian nation state. This idea, and I suspect the president, the current president, Tinubu, is following that path, at least from his speech, in which they talk about the unity of Nigeria. There's an ethos of trying to make us a united Nigeria, where people are just Nigerians. So we invent horrible terms like detribalized. That's one of the ugliest words in the English language, detribalized. It makes no sense and it doesn't sound well. So we try to create a nation where we say a country where people have no tribes, people have, that is a narrative. I argue that for the past 54 years or so, what we have in the country has shown that project, that narrative, is a failed narrative. If I were to redesign a new narrative for Nigeria, what I would suggest is to view Nigeria as a union of nations, not one nation Nigeria. A union of nations where people are allowed to be different cultures coexist within the law, a law that will be certain, clear, transparent, and allow people to thrive. So a union of nations that allow diversity for progress and prosperity. That is a narrative that can be pushed forward. A nation with a huge population that can influence itself, its neighbors, and the world. That is a narrative that can be looked for, that has to be created. I would add to that, on my personal note, a nation where politics is less important than medicine and arts and trade. That for me is the future, because I want Nigerians to think about it. The best Nigerian has offered the world, from arts to sports to music to science to literature, anything you think about, we have done well where government is not involved. If you look around you, if you look at the things we have been able to do well, it is where government is not involved. When government gets involved, we don't tend to do well. So maybe we need to start building that narrative of a nation of individual entrepreneurs, self-made people who do not look up to government, who are diverse and use their diversity to grow.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Anthony Kila, for joining us on the morning show.